It's absolutely unbelievable that any member of the royal family could have set about creating what is an international scandal where people have the means, as a result of her and her husband's conduct, to question whether they have perpetrated the scam of the century.
Based on one that wants to be out of the public light, doesn't want his children involved, and that's why we see keep them get the back of their heads, and one that's desperate to utilise that.
And utilise the children.
The scam of the century. That's what Lady Colin Campbell called it, straight up, on the record, zero hesitation. And when a woman with her connections, her credibility, and her decades buried inside the British royal world drops a phrase like that, you stop and listen. She doesn't throw words around carelessly. Thomas Markle has been circling that same conclusion for years, not with her polish, not with her insider access. He's a father, a grandfather, carrying the kind of raw, unfiltered pain that only comes from asking one simple question over and over again and getting nothing back. He's been sharing new details about little Lilibet, what he's been shown, what he hasn't, and what he actually believes. The reaction from people who followed this story closely? Pure disbelief. Today, we're breaking down exactly what Thomas Markle has put out there, why it hits harder than most people realize, and what some of the most respected voices in the royal world are saying about a situation that flat out refuses to disappear. But before we get into what Thomas said, you need to understand what this man has been living through, because the story of a grandfather completely cut off from his own grandkids is by itself one of the wildest parts of this whole saga. There's a question that's been sitting at the center of this story for years. Thomas Markle is the one man alive who has every right to ask it.
I do believe, because there are no delivery certificates, and I heard stories early on around the time Archie was allegedly in utero and being born. I heard stories that royal staffers were not allowed to see or touch her abdomen. And what really got me was the idea that a royal physician was not allowed to examine her womb.
And every reason to understand why the answer matters. The question is simple. Who are these children, really? What do we actually know about them? And why has every single attempt to find out, including from the children's own grandfather, been met with a wall of silence so solid and so sustained that the silence itself has become one of the most telling facts in this entire story? Start with the basics, because even the basics are wild. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor just turned 5 years old, younger child of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. She carries a name chosen to honor two of the most beloved women in royal history, the late Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana. And her maternal grandfather, Thomas Markle, reportedly has never had any real relationship with her. Not one. No visits, no phone calls, not even a private photo passed between family the way normal families do. Nothing. Thomas Markle has been speaking publicly about this, and the details he's shared have left people genuinely shaken. He's an elderly man in declining health, living in Rosarito Beach in Mexico, watching his daughter's children grow up through the same carefully curated social media posts the rest of the world scrolls past. No more access than a complete stranger. No more information than a random fan online. The grandfather, in every practical sense, does not exist in these children's lives, and he's said so clearly, repeatedly, with zero meaningful response from the other side.
Sorry, but the ever-changing hair colour and ever-changing size of their children is what causes so many conspiracy theories. How can she be smaller now at age 5 than she was a year ago climbing Mama Mountain? They are playing games, and I think even using AI to manipulate images. Yes, I believe they have children before anyone says otherwise, but perhaps this is why Harry allows her to release pictures of the kids as long as she heavily edits out their faces. Something is always off with the photos, and it's obvious they are heavily photoshopped and often badly, hence the little girl's hand melting into the balloon strings.
What makes his recent statements about Lilibet cut even deeper is how specific he's gotten. He's not just talking about being pushed out painful, as that already is. He's talking about what that exclusion actually implies. is, about the questions it raises when you stack it up against the photos Meghan keeps posting, about what a grandfather who has never been allowed to simply look at his grandchild's face thinks when the images being offered keep shifting, presenting a child who doesn't look quite consistent from one photo to the next. That combination, denied access and an inconsistent visual record, is what has people genuinely unsettled. Look at the timeline. Lilibet was born in June 2021. In the years since, Thomas Markle has sat down for multiple interviews, talking about his longing to know his grandchildren, his confusion at being locked out, and the specific concerns the photo record keeps raising. He's done all of this knowing he'll get dragged for it, knowing Meghan's team will frame his pain as something embarrassing or inappropriate. He's done it anyway because he believes these questions matter, and the people listening to him believe they matter too. What his supporters find hardest to sit with isn't even the drama, it's how ordinary his requests are. He's not calling for a press conference, he's not asking for a public statement, he's asking for the things every grandfather deserves.
That's what Meghan is doing. She's not fooling anybody. Meghan is a hypocrite in the biggest sense of the word, because these children have moments where they look completely different in their sizes, in the color of their hair. I think what Meghan is doing is trying to control a narrative, but failing miserably at it. We have caught on to her. We figured her out.
A photo, a phone call, the sound of his grandchild's voice, the simple certainty of knowing the children his daughter brought into this world. That's not a big ask. That's the bare minimum of what family means, and it's been denied completely, with no explanation given whatsoever. This is a member of the same family speaking, describing something that, if accurate, is genuinely without precedent in the history of the British royal family. A royal physician, a doctor whose entire professional function is the care of members of the royal household, refused access. Staffers turned away from any proximity to the baby bump. A pregnancy managed with a level of physical secrecy that nobody who was present has ever been able to adequately explain. These are specific claims. They have never been refuted with any detail. They have simply been met, as all such claims are, with silence. Thomas Markle has heard these accounts. He's processed them the way any father would, with confusion, hurt, and something that has gradually hardened into a very specific set of questions. His recent statements about Lilibet reflect a man who has moved beyond grief and into something more purposeful. He wants answers. He believes he is entitled to answers, and he has decided, with the time he has left, to keep asking until someone provides them. The royal physician detail is the one that stays with people because it is so specific, so verifiable in principle, so completely unlike anything ever reported about any other royal pregnancy.
That bump had more ups and downs than Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's marriage. I'd never known another woman of colour or another woman without colour to have performed in a pregnancy the way Meghan did. Anything to do with those children and how they came into existence would have possibly racial implications, when of course it's nothing to do with that at all.
A physician whose professional duty is the examination and care of royal household members being turned away not by accident, not through oversight, but deliberately is not a detail that belongs in the story of a straightforward, conventional birth. It belongs in a completely different kind of story. And Thomas Markle, sitting in Mexico with no access to his grandchildren and a growing stack of unanswered questions, has been piecing that story together for years. What this pattern of secrecy also does, and this is something Thomas Markle has returned to repeatedly, is remove any possibility of the kind of casual, unguarded encounter between grandparent and grandchild that would provide the most natural form of reassurance. Nobody is asking Meghan and Harry to hold a press conference about their children. Nobody is demanding access beyond what any normal family would regard as entirely routine. Thomas Markle is asking for the things that grandfathers have always had, and the completeness of the refusal, not conditional, not delayed, but total and sustained across years, speaks to a motivation that goes well beyond ordinary family estrangement. A child who appears smaller at 5 than she did at 4. hair that changes between photographs in ways that lighting alone cannot account for, a hand that dissolves into balloon strings in a manner that points unmistakably to digital editing. These are not vague impressions. These are specific, documented.
Hugo is extremely cautious. Hugo, which I am not. I don't need to be. I can call a spade a spade. But also Hugo is, by saying what he has said, what Hugo is actually saying is the birth has raised questions of fraudulence, because you cannot give birth after you have given birth.
Repeatable observations that anyone can make by looking at the available images side by side. And once you've made them, they are very difficult to unmake. Followers who've been tracking Thomas Markle's public statements have been connecting these dots with urgency, because what's being described is a visual record of Lilibet that simply does not behave the way child's photographic record should. A real child, photographed over time, grows consistently, looks recognizably like herself across the years, does not fluctuate in apparent size, does not have hands that merge with props. The record of Lilibet does none of these things reliably. And Thomas Markle, who has never been permitted to see his granddaughter in person, is left looking at these images and asking what any of us would ask. Is this real? The birthday post that set off the latest wave of conversation showed Lilibet in a sundress, back of her head to the camera, a gold bangle on her wrist that looks strikingly similar to Meghan's own Cartier bracelet, which immediately raised questions about whether even a young child's birthday photo can exist without some kind of commercial angle. The sympathetic press called it adorable. But the royal watchers who've been paying close attention noticed what they always notice: the inconsistencies, the questions, the feeling of an image that was carefully constructed rather than simply captured. Thomas Markle noticed too. We have caught on to her. We figured her out.
Silence everybody and just produce a DNA sample or proof of delivery. If you had those things, it would be very easy just to put them out there and say, this is what happened. This is what it is. And so, if they don't like it, why don't they just satisfy the curiosity and the controversy?
That's the sentiment running through Thomas Markle's circle of supporters right now. The details have been piling up: years of visual inconsistencies, zero normal grandparental access, and complete silence in response to every specific question raised. It's reached a breaking point. The usual deflections aren't landing anymore. The privacy argument has worn thin. Too many people have been watching too carefully for too long, and the conclusions they've reached won't be undone by a carefully worded statement to a friendly journalist. Thomas Markle's position in all of this remains uniquely powerful because he is not a commentator. He is the grandfather. He is the person most naturally positioned to notice if something about these children's appearance doesn't match the family he knows. His exclusion, total, absolute, sustained across years, is itself one of the most significant facts in this entire story. You don't keep a grandfather away from his grandchildren this long, this completely, without a reason. That reason has never been given, and in the absence of a reason, conclusions form. Lady Colin Campbell goes straight to the thing nobody else will say out loud the moment these questions get raised. The race card gets played, and she is absolutely right to name it and take it apart in the same breath, because it is the single most effective tool available for shutting down legitimate scrutiny. But this has nothing to do with race. It never did. It has everything to do with a specific, observable.
You're not protecting their privacy because you're putting them out there purposefully. And the one thing that I would say is a little different with people who do say the same thing but also obscure their children's faces is when their children are, maybe caught in a shot that they didn't expect their child would be there. But what Meghan is doing clearly is she is highlighting these children constantly and putting them out there front and center to say, look at my children. That's what she is saying.
Repeatedly documented set of physical inconsistencies that would raise the exact same questions no matter who the mother was. Thomas Markle doesn't come at this from Lady Colin Campbell's sharp, analytical angle. He comes at it as a father and a grandfather, with the bluntness of a man who has no professional image to protect and nothing left to lose. But his conclusion runs in the exact same direction as her far more forensic assessment. Something about his grandchildren's story does not add up. The secrecy has always been wildly out of proportion to any normal explanation. Two very different people, two completely different vantage points, the same unanswered question. Then there's Hugo Vickers, one of the most careful, most respected, most precisely sourced royal historians in Britain, a man who chooses his words the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel. He has said, in his measured and deliberate way, something that Lady Colin Campbell has since translated into plain English. The birth raised questions of fraudulence. That is not a forum post. That is not an anonymous tip. That is one of Britain's most distinguished royal scholars, putting something on the record that the mainstream media has collectively chosen to look away from. Thomas Markle's supporters have not looked away. For them, Hugo Vickers speaking publicly represents a turning point the moment these questions stop being a family matter and become a question of historical record. The grandfather is asking, his family is asking, Lady Colin Campbell is asking, Hugo Vickers is asking. The chorus has grown too large, too credentialed, and too specific to be dismissed as tabloid noise. Something happened. Something has been concealed. And Thomas Markle believes he deserves to know what it is. That's the dimension of this story his supporters have been sitting with for years. The questions aren't just about what happened during the pregnancies, they're about what the behavior since then reveals. A normal family, even a messy and estranged one, would not require this level of control, would not need to manage every image, would not need to cut off all grandparental access, would not need to handle information about two children with the intensity of a classified operation. The level of control surrounding Archie and Lilibet is out of proportion to any innocent explanation.
And the biggest part of all of this, I believe, is going to be when these children do grow up and they get bigger, they're going to see the manipulation that their mother is doing. They're going to call their mother out later in life, because Meghan is trying to use her children in a way that is not honest. She is trying to represent something that is clearly being manipulated. And you know, that's what people resent.
And it's that disproportionality, something Thomas Markle sensed long before it became public discussion, that sits at the core of everything he's been saying. It really is this simple. If every observer raising concerns is wrong, the answer is a document, the kind of record every single birth produces. The kind of record that, in the case of children whose existence has been under sustained public scrutiny for years, would shut this conversation down permanently. Produce it, publish it, end it. The fact that this hasn't happened, that years have passed, questions have multiplied, the grandfather has been denied all access, the photos keep stacking up inconsistency after inconsistency, and still nothing has been put forward to resolve it. It's for Thomas Markle's supporters the answer itself. The absence of proof, when proof should be the easiest thing in the world to provide, is its own kind of answer. Thomas Markle has said it across interviews, in his own words, the same thing over and over. Show me. Let me know my grandchildren. Let me be a grandfather in even the smallest way. And the response every single time has been silence. Strategic, unbroken, impenetrable silence. It's that silence more than any photo anomaly, more than any expert opinion, more than any specific claim that people find truly impossible to accept. Lilibet just turned 5, and her own grandfather still cannot tell you what she looks like. Let that land for a second. Here's the part that Thomas Markle's supporters find hardest to swallow. The grandfather is kept completely in the dark. No private photos, no phone calls, no visits, none of the ordinary back and forth of family. Zero. And yet, on that same platform, in those same weeks, these children's presence is being put on display in front of millions of strangers deliberately, for engagement, for commercial gain. The grandfather cannot see his granddaughter's face, but the followers get her silhouette, Her hair, her hands, the gold bangle on her wrist. The world gets the fragments. Thomas Markle gets nothing. That gap between the intimacy performed for strangers and the total exclusion enforced on family tells you everything about what the privacy argument actually is and what it actually isn't. Privacy, it turns out, is applied very selectively. Strangers get access, the grandfather gets a wall. There's also something deeper here that doesn't get talked about enough.
I think Meghan is going to prove to be like Angelina Jolie. There are some women who will do anything to work over a man, and children are fair game. I have little doubt that if there was a divorce, she would bend over backwards to be as nasty as possible. That's just her personality.
Thomas Markle's exclusion isn't just painful for him personally, it has real consequences for these children. Archie and Lilibet are growing up with no knowledge of half their maternal family's history, their roots, their heritage. Not because that heritage is something to be ashamed of or hidden, but because their mother has decided, for reasons she has never once clearly explained, to keep it from them. Thomas Markle isn't just a man being denied access. He is a piece of these children's identity being actively buried. The stories he could tell them about their mother's childhood, about where they come from, about who they are on that side of their family, none of it is reaching them. Whether it ever will is, right now, completely uncertain. But these children will grow up. That reckoning is coming, and nobody in Meghan's world seems to have fully faced it. Archie is 7. Lilibet just turned 5. They are starting to form real memories, starting to understand the shape of the family they were born into. And one of the things they will eventually come to understand is that they have a grandfather in Mexico who asked publicly, repeatedly, at real personal cost, to simply know them, who was turned away every time with no explanation given. That knowledge will hit hard when it arrives. Thomas Markle's public statements about Lilibet are the actions of a man running out of time. He is not young, he is not in good health, and he is determined that the questions he's been carrying will be heard before he no longer has the chance to ask them. His supporters get that. They are not here for the drama, they are genuinely disturbed by the reality of it. A grandfather locked out, a birthday marked by more photos that raise more questions, and a carefully managed public image being maintained instead of simply opening the door. Taken all together, this is a situation that no single word can fully capture. Thomas Markle has been written out of this story so completely that his efforts to push back the interviews, the statements, the public appeals read as the actions of a man who simply refuses to accept that a grandfather can be made to disappear from his own grandchildren's lives without the world noticing. He believes the world should notice, and increasingly, it does. What Thomas Markle has revealed about Lilibet isn't one single dramatic bombshell. It's something far more cumulative and in many ways far more powerful. It's the full picture of a grandfather denied every form of access, watching shifting and inconsistent images of a child he has never properly met, who has heard directly from within his own family about the extraordinary secrecy surrounding her birth, and who has decided, with time running short, to say out loud exactly what he believes. No filter, no apology, no more waiting, and people are struggling to process it because the situation genuinely is unbelievable. A little girl turns 5. Her grandfather still does not know her face, not from a visit, not from a phone call, not from a single private photograph passed between family members the way families have always done. The questions that should have been settled years ago remain stubbornly, completely without answer, and every passing birthday makes that silence louder, not quieter. Consider what has actually been put on the record at this point. Lady Colin Campbell, a woman with real sourcing, real standing, and decades inside the world she is describing, has used language she does not reach for lightly. Hugo Vickers, one of Britain's most precise and credentialed royal historians, has raised questions about fraudulence in terms careful enough to be deliberate and pointed enough to be unmistakable. Thomas Markle, the grandfather himself, has spoken publicly and repeatedly about being denied access so complete it defies any ordinary explanation. These are not internet theories. These are not anonymous forum posts. These are named, credentialed, accountable people saying things on the record that the mainstream press has chosen collectively to step around. That pattern of avoidance is itself worth examining. When a story is simply wrong, it gets corrected. When a claim is baseless, it gets refuted. What does not happen, in the normal course of things, is that serious people with serious reputations raise serious questions, and every official direction responds with sustained, unbroken, years-long silence. That is not how you handle misinformation. That is how you handle something you cannot afford to directly address. Thomas Markle understands this dynamic better than most because he has been living inside it. He is not a political figure. He is not a media personality running a campaign. He is an elderly man in declining health, living quietly in Mexico, who has watched his daughter become one of the most discussed public figures on the planet and who has been systematically excluded from any real knowledge of the family she has built. His asks have never been complicated. A photograph, a phone call, the ordinary, unremarkable contact that grandparents and grandchildren share in millions of families across the world every single day. And every single ask has been met with the same answer: nothing. What makes this particularly striking is the contrast that plays out in real time, publicly, for anyone paying attention. The same weeks that Thomas Markle is being denied a private photograph of his granddaughter are the weeks that carefully staged images of that same granddaughter are being posted for millions of strangers. The same period in which the grandfather cannot get a phone call is the period in which Lilibet's silhouette, her hair, her accessories are being offered up as content for public consumption. That is not privacy. That is control. And there is a very significant difference between the two. Privacy protects a child from public exposure. What is being described here is something else entirely. A child selectively exposed to the public while being simultaneously concealed from her own family. The grandfather gets less access than a stranger with a phone. That inversion is not accidental, and it is not a minor detail. It is the clearest possible signal of what the stated privacy concerns actually amount to, and what they are actually designed to achieve. And then there is the question of the children themselves, because they are the ones who will ultimately live with the consequences of all of this. Archie and Lilibet are growing up without half their maternal family's history, without the stories, the context, the texture of where they come from on that side. Thomas Markle carries knowledge about their mother's childhood, about their family's roots, about the people and places that shaped the woman Meghan became, and none of that is reaching these children. Not because it is harmful, not because it is complicated in any way that a family couldn't navigate, but because the door has been firmly shut and nobody on the outside has been given any real reason why. That absence has a name. It is called erasure, and children who grow up with pieces of their identity deliberately withheld from them tend, eventually, to go looking for what was kept from them. Archie is 7 now. Lilibet just turned 5. They are at the age where the world starts to take shape around them, where they begin to understand the structure of the family they were born into, where questions start forming that will only grow more complex as they get older. And one of the things they will one day understand with complete clarity, because it is all documented, all public, all on the record, is that their grandfather in Mexico was asking to know them out loud, repeatedly, at real personal cost to himself, and that he was turned away every single time without explanation. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of knowledge that reshapes how a person understands their own story. Thomas Markle's public statements about Lilibet are the actions of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and why. He is not young, he is not in strong health, he is not operating under any illusion that he has unlimited time. What he has is a set of questions he believes matter, a platform that allows him to ask them, and a determination that they will be heard while he still has the ability to ask them. His supporters understand this urgency on a deeply human level. They are not watching this story for entertainment. They are watching it because the reality of it, a grandfather locked out, a birthday passing with more unanswered questions than the last, a public image carefully maintained, while a family member sits alone in Mexico with nothing, is genuinely difficult to sit with. The wall of silence that has been the main response to all of this is also showing signs of strain. Not because anyone on the inside has started talking, but because the outside pressure has grown too consistent, too credentialed, and too specific to be absorbed indefinitely. Some questions develop weight over time. They accumulate. They don't disappear with a well-placed magazine story or a sympathetic headline. And the questions surrounding Thomas Markle's exclusion and the photographic record of Lilibet have been building for years, picking up names and credentials along the way, growing into something that a carefully worded public statement simply cannot neutralize. There is also something worth saying about the community that has formed around this story. The people who follow Thomas Markle's statements, cross-reference the photographic record, and have tracked the inconsistencies with a kind of patience that only comes from genuinely caring about what the truth is. They are not a fringe. They are not a conspiracy corner of the internet. They are people who looked at what was available, asked reasonable questions, received no answers, and kept looking. The fact that their numbers have grown rather than shrunk over time tells you something important about how this story is landing, with ordinary people applying ordinary logic to what they are seeing. And ordinary logic is actually all this requires. If the questions being raised are wrong, produce what would make them wrong. If the concerns about the photographic record are mistaken, provide images that resolve the inconsistencies. If Thomas Markle's exclusion has a legitimate explanation, give one. These are not complicated solutions. They are the simplest possible responses to a situation that has been allowed to grow, unchecked, for years. The fact that none of them have been provided is not a neutral fact. It is a choice. And choices of that kind, sustained over that length of time, carry their own unmistakable meaning. What also gets lost in the broader conversation is just how isolated Thomas Markle actually is in all of this. He is not part of a coordinated media effort. He has no legal team drafting his statements, no PR machine shaping his narrative, no powerful friends placing calls on his behalf. He is a private citizen in declining health, sitting in a house in Mexico, occasionally picking up the phone to do an interview because it is the only tool available to him. The disparity between his resources and the apparatus he is up against could not be more stark, and yet the questions he is raising have not been silenced. They have spread. They have found credentialed voices willing to echo them. They have reached people who had never heard his name and left them asking the same things he has been asking for years. That staying power matters. Stories without substance fade. Narratives built on nothing collapse under their own weight when the moment passes. This one has not faded, it has not collapsed. It has done the opposite, grown denser, more documented, more difficult to wave away with each passing month. And Thomas Markle, the man at the center of it, shows no sign of stopping. He has made clear, in interview after interview, that he intends to keep asking until the questions are answered, or until he physically no longer can. That is not the posture of someone who believes he is wrong. That is the posture of someone who believes with complete conviction that he is right and that the silence on the other side confirms it. There is a human cost to all of this that gets underplayed. Thomas Markle is not just fighting a public relations battle. He is a grandfather who is aging, who is unwell, and who is genuinely running out of time to know the grandchildren he has been denied access to. Every year that passes without resolution is a year he does not get back. Every birthday that comes and goes with another Instagram post and another wall of silence is another marker on a timeline that is not infinite. The weight of that is not abstract. It is real, it is personal, and it is getting heavier. And the children will carry weight of their own. Archie and Lilibet are not going to be young forever. The ages they are now, 7 and 5, are exactly the ages at which the world begins to take on a shape they will remember. The stories being told around them, the absences they are learning to accept as normal, the relatives they have never been allowed to meet, all of it is forming the foundation of how they will eventually understand their own lives. And when they are old enough to go looking for what was kept from them, the entire record will be waiting. Every interview Thomas Markle gave, every question he asked, every door that was closed in his face, it is all documented, it is all public, and it will not disappear. Sit with this for a moment. Thomas Markle is a grandfather who has never properly seen his granddaughter's face, not in person, not through a private photograph, not through any of the quiet and unremarkable moments that grandparents and grandchildren share across the world every single day. Lilibet just turned 5 years old. 5 full years have passed, and the man who is biologically her grandfather still cannot tell you what she actually looks like. 5 birthdays, 5 years of carefully staged images posted for strangers. 5 years of the same answer, nothing every time. He asked for the bare minimum of what family is supposed to mean. How much longer can this go on before something finally has to give? How many more birthdays? How many more polished posts? How many more public appeals answered with silence before the weight of it becomes impossible to carry quietly? At some point, the gap between what is being performed for the public and what is being denied to family becomes too wide to explain away. That point may already have passed. The questions are not going away. The people asking them are not going away. Thomas Markle is not going away. And the children at the center of all of this are growing up, which means the clock on all of it is moving in one direction only. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think Thomas Markle deserves answers? Do you think those answers are ever actually coming? Because something tells me this community already knows exactly what it thinks, and I genuinely want to hear it. If this story hit differently for you today, if it gave you something real to sit with long after the screen goes dark, go ahead and give it a like. It costs nothing, and it helps this reach more people who care about cutting through the noise. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell so you'll hear when the next piece drops, and share this with someone who follows this story as closely as you do. The conversation is growing. The questions are not going away. We'll see you on the next one.